Welcome to Abolition Radio, the broadcast outreach of Love Never Fails, inviting you to join the fight to end human trafficking.
Oh, give me eyes to see. Oh, give me strength to lead. You give me all I need. So give me courage to believe.
Each week, Abolition Radio sheds light on the darkness of modern slavery, celebrates the work of abolitionists who are fighting for freedom, and equips the church to engage in the work of justice with hope rooted in God's Word. Our goal is to see a radio audience become an army of gospel activists.
You're in the neighborhoods we live in. You're in the ones we're passing by. You're in the ones we call our neighbors. And the ones who still escape our eyes.
Now here's the host of Abolition Radio, founder and executive director of Love Never Fails, Vanessa Scott.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are here in the studio. You're in for a treat. I'm, of course, here with my lovely co-host, Miss Benita Hopkins.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. And in the studio, we also have some special guests that are here to talk about the issues surrounding the law and legal services that we provide to survivors of human trafficking, and also some of the things that are happening in terms of federal law and state law. So here in the studio with us, we have Daphne Phung, who is the executive director of Californians Against Slavery and author of many propositions and Senate bills that you'll be learning about later. Hi, Daphne.
Hi there. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. And then we also have here with us is Rose Carlyle, who has joined us from Bay Area Women Against Rape. BAWAR, also the acronym for Bay Area Women Against Rape, they have been working in this space for over 30 years. Is that right?
Yeah, we are actually the nation's very first rape crisis center. Wow. Started in 1971.
So they do a tremendous amount of advocacy and supporting of survivors as they're in courtrooms. And I want to talk some more to Rose about the kinds of things that are helping in terms of the laws of the land and things that, you know, maybe they're influencing and changing. So we'll be talking to Rose some more about that. And then part of our garden today is also Rose Mukhar from Law Offices of Rose Mukhar. And those of you who were tuned in a couple weeks back, I asked you for a name for her office. So I don't know if she's got the name yet, but
still working on it.
Rose is here to talk about the wonderful legal services that she's been providing Love Never Fails, thriving survivors. So hi, Rose.
Hi, thank you for asking me to be here today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we did ask for that support from those to help you with your name. So
that's right.
So if anybody's out there, I'm still working on trying to sort out a name. I'm an attorney, solo practitioner doing pro bono work for survivors. So
cool.
Yay. So one of the things we wanted to invite these powerful women together here to talk about the advocacy that is so very important in restoring our survivors to a place of thriving and to really living. And we kind of touched on it a couple of weeks ago when we talked about the program needs and the needs that survivors need in terms of, when you have let's say, I think I mentioned that there was one of our survivors had 46 pages of a rap sheet of being, prosecuted for quote unquote prostitution for over a 6-year period. And we were able to work with an agency to get that. Actually, she worked with an agency to get her record expunged, and we were there to support her during that process. We see that all the time. And so we're going to be hearing about how, folks like Daphne and Californians Against Slavery have been advocating for changes in laws at the federal level and at the state level, and then how it's actually playing out in terms of the services that are being provided by, for example, for BAWAR and Rose Mukhar, who is our Director of Legal Services at Love Never Fails. And I do want to also mention that, there are things, and you heard us last week, we talked about maybe some differences of opinions about how we approach moving survivors into thriving. And for me, I think it's very important, especially when you bring up law, you're going to have differences of opinions. There's always an argument on one side or the other. So just kind of prefacing that I might push us in some different directions to get some different opinions about, how is Prop 35 working? What's the practical application of that? How is, for example, what we're doing with SB 1165, we're huge proponents of that. And Daphne, I'm sure will have some thoughts about the way that, it was moved from we wanted to see the state say mandate this education in the schools, and it became a recommendation, which has some financial implications. So let's give ourselves some space to be honest and to agree to disagree. I believe that being respectful as we disagree is a key to moving forward in this fight for justice. And hearing each other. So we're agreeing that we're going to argue a little bit today. Did you hear that? Is that okay? Okay.
Sounds good.
It's going to be a fair fight, though. So I promise you. We're also going to tell you some details about things that are going on in the community, ways that you can get involved. We're very excited about having these ladies here. So why don't we start off just a little bit and I'd love to hear from each of the ladies about how they got started in the fight against human trafficking, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the legal side of it. So, Rose Carlyle from BAWAR. I've got a garden growing here. So Rose Carlyle, what got you started in this fight against human trafficking?
A number of things brought me to this work. The way that I connected with the particular program that I'm in within BAWAR, the Sexually Exploited Minors Program, was actually through originally training as a volunteer for the organization and just really wanting to work with survivors of sexual assault of any kind. And this particular area came to be one that I feel really passionate about because of how it ties into so many other areas of oppression within our culture and our society. Especially, I have a lot of interest in working with disproportionality of representation of certain groups within foster care and within the criminal justice system. And it's so directly tied to this issue of human trafficking because of the people that it disproportionately punishes, right? That reframing of putting them in the role of victim, like it sounds like you talked a little bit before on another show, hasn't reached a lot of the people that we work with. And that is part of the reason that I feel so passionate about this group, is because it's this overlap between these two different areas that I feel so strongly about, that disproportionality and also the importance of supporting survivors of sexual assault and any kind of, physical abuse of that type.
Great. Yeah. And we need people. And that to me, Benita talked about how she came in as a volunteer, and it's like once you, those of you who are listening, just volunteering for a couple of hours really opens your eyes to what we're really dealing with. And I call it the insult to injury. It's like, that disproportional. It's like, okay, I'm already in foster care. Isn't that enough? Do these people have to then prey on me and subject me to even further abuse? And then the system is not set up to even, to catch me when I'm falling. And so I love that that's your heart. What about you, our second Rose? I'm going to start calling you colors. Like, are you yellow? Are you red today? But Rose Mukhar, what brought you to this fight?
I went into law school knowing I wanted to do human rights, and came out of law school very happy. I had my law degree. It took me a while to get there. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to do human rights. And I thought, wait a minute, what exactly does that mean? I'm not fluent in a second language. And it wasn't tangible to me, even though I had the law degree and was able to practice. So I started doing family law, working with, volunteering actually, working with Community Overcoming Relationship Abuse in San Mateo County, also known as CORA, providing legal services to victims of domestic violence. And it gave me some great courtroom experience. It also made me have a wider perspective on how victims are viewed in the court setting and in the justice setting. I enjoyed the work I was doing, but it didn't feel like human rights to me. Even though it very much is human rights, it just wasn't filling my heart with what I wanted to do. And while I was in law school, I became interested in the laws of armed conflict, and in particular, looking at child soldiering and child combatants. And so, even though I was practicing and doing this great work, I went back to law school to get a master's in law, an LLM, focusing specifically on human rights and what I can do here in the United States. So, and also trying to figure out what I could do for children. Even though there's no child soldiers here in the United States, there is throughout the world.
Yes, there's definitely need.
And when I went back, it dawned on me about child soldiering is trafficking.
It's a connection, yeah.
And so then that got me thinking about trafficking does happen here in the U.S. And what we actually studied, there was a specific case that we studied about trafficking going on in Disneyland and how that's not suspected because you have adults with children, and so no one's going to be suspicious of that. And that really just lit a fire under me about children and trafficking. And so then I got to the point where I wanted to focus my practice specifically with working with survivors, not just minors, adults as well.
Yeah, and we're so grateful for you. So we're going to go to break here in just a second, but when we come back, we're going to hear from Daphne Phung about what drew her to this fight against human trafficking, and then we're going to dig into what exactly, what's the lay of the land in terms of the laws, and what are what do we need to advocate for in terms of changing laws, and what's working, all that good stuff. So we'll be right back in just a moment with Abolition Radio.
We'll be back with more Abolition Radio right after these messages.
This is Pastor Gary from Faith Fellowship in San Leandro. We are so excited about the launch of Abolition Radio every Saturday. And we have seen Love Never Fails under Vanessa Scott grow right here in San Leandro out of our church at Faith Fellowship. And now her ministry, God gave her a passion to get young people out of the sex trafficking and sex slave industry. And she has been doing a phenomenal job. Not only is it locally, but now it's going globally. In fact, I prophesied to her that God was going to use her to go nationwide, and that's exactly what's been happening. She is a woman with a vision, with a direction, and a passion to see these young people come out of this kind of arena. And to God be the glory. Join with her every Saturday on Abolition Radio to hear what she has to say and then become a part of what she's doing. AbolitionRadio.org. Love never fails.
Welcome back to Abolition Radio, where you are invited to join the fight against human trafficking.
And welcome back with Abolition Radio, the broadcast outreach of Love Never Fails. And again, we're in the studio with Bonita Hopkins, our co-host, and Rose Carlyle from BAWAR.
Hello.
And Rose Mukhar from the law offices of Rose Mukhar, soon to be announced the title. And Daphne Phung from California Against Slavery. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
So we were just digging into kind of what drove each of us to this fight against human trafficking. And Daphne, if you wouldn't mind just kind of sharing with us how you got started and what's driving your passion there.
Well, I saw a documentary in 2009 on MSNBC, Sex Slaves in America, and that really opened my eyes, really not so much to the issue, but more so to the fact that there's, even in our judicial system, the victims are being victimized. So that's when I decided that we need to change the law, and I want to go through the initiative process.
Yeah.
That's when I started California Against Slavery as an organization and moved on to work on Prop 35.
Well, I just have to say, just a kind of a side note here, you and I both work for I work for Cisco Systems at the moment, and at the time you were working for the same place. So there's something in the water there, don't you think, Daphne? There's some angry ladies working at Cisco Systems. Look out. That technology gets you fired up. But I'm so glad that you were watching that show when you were, and that God, put you in that place and stirred you up as he did, because Prop 35 passed with, is it still the highest level of proposition passing in history?
Yes, still has. Right.
Incredible. So we're going to learn more about what's happening with Prop 35, and and I'd love to hear a little bit about SB 1165 and then the other other Senate bills that passed earlier last year, I should say. But I'd like to hop over to you, Rose, and talk a little bit about what are you seeing. So tell us a little bit about the kinds of cases that you're working on today, and ones that where you're seeing some pretty great progress, and then others where you're really feeling challenged. I'd love to hear.
Good question. A lot of the work, I think, is challenging. There are some rewards. I guess so. I do a wide spectrum of legal assistance and support, ranging from helping a survivor or thriver trying to get their records expunged, from trying to help them get custody if they've lost their children through the process of being trafficked, or to at least help establish them getting a relationship to get one step closer to getting custody of their children. The most challenging but passionate for me is working with survivors that have been victims and the trafficker or exploiters actually being prosecuted. Victims, and I use the word victims because that's what the legal justice refers to them as victims, even though a survivor may never want to use that word. Right. But they have rights to be represented in the courtroom, and I think it's very important that takes place because often the victims may feel coerced by law enforcement, the prosecutors themselves, to get the evidence that they have and to have them come forward, and they might not be in a position to actually want to do that or even capable of doing that for whatever reason, whether the trauma was made such an impact on their life that they're unable to talk about it, they may not have the memory for it. They are still living in fear because that exploiter, that trafficker has just instilled that fear in them if they do share the information or the evidence, whatever that the law enforcement is trying to seek. And so sometimes I do work with clients that are willing to testify and want to testify, but have serious concerns about being re-victimized. And so they have if they have representation, they have an attorney going in, and they can stand up to the justice system and say that we have somebody who wants to testify, but especially if they're a minor, let's not have them testify in the courtroom right in front of their exploiter, which right now, if you're under the age of 13, you can petition to the court to not to provide your evidence in front of the exploiter. But if you're over 13 and under 18, by law, you have to testify in front of that exploiter and that trafficker. And so just trying to educate the legal system from the prosecutor to the judge, even to the defense attorney, to understand what it is how that will impact the evidence that they're trying to get, even if you have a victim who's wanting to testify. That can just be burdensome to them. And so that's one of the things I think that I feel there's a strong need for. That's something that I find challenging the most is being able to give voice to the victim and not having them be re-victimized.
I have a question about that. So, Calico, for example, takes video of children, I believe under 18. So that age between 13 and 17, let's just say, the video is not acceptable. It's not something that can be used in lieu of a testimony, or do you know? I'm not.
Well, it depends. So if there's a criminal prosecution, and so there's, the defendant has the right to a fair trial. So if they're present during the video and they're able to raise whatever questions that they feel fit. But I'm not familiar with Calico and the videoing. Is this when they're
actually debriefing them as trying to do an investigation, and they'll sit down with a child who's been exploited or who's been abused? And you probably have a lot of experience with this, huh, Rose? If you want to chime in,
a little bit. My understanding is that is not acceptable as a stand-in for evidence.
Okay,
it is an amazing part of the investigative process that has evolved over the years to have these more kind of well-managed, safe, highly trained people doing interviews with these minors. And I still think my other Rose here is correct when she says that the minors over the age of 13 do have to face their their traffickers directly in court.
Now, just bringing you into this for a second, Daphne, I thought that part of Prop 35 was eliminating or addressing the issue of not requiring a minor to have to show force. Wasn't that part of it?
Due to the trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, not showing force is different from, not needing the evidence of force is different from not having to testify, because the defendant still has the right, a constitutional right for a cross-examination, that they are indeed all guilty of the crime, right? So we are actually doing some research right now on drafting a bill around this issue, where if we can prove that a victim is going to be severely impacted and negatively impacted by the testimony in court, that they may be able to do, like a closed circuit television testimony. They do that right now, like your other guest said, for minors under 13 years old, and also for those who have developmental disabilities, for adults.
If you can show to the court that there's evidence for whatever reason, whether it's an adult with developmental issues or just even from the trauma, so an 18 or 19 potentially could do that. The bar is very hard to show that, because you're relying on the court wants an expert to come in and testify. And when we're talking about survivors, they might not even have access to health care to provide an expert to come in and testify. So right now it's a very hard bar. And Daphne, I'd love to work with you specifically on that legislation that you're working on.
Vanessa, when we come back, can we hit on the trauma? It sounds like what Rose is saying, it's so traumatic because it is. It's very traumatic for a child, let alone an adult.
It's traumatic.
It's traumatic, period.
The judge is looking in front of you. You may have a jury in front of you. It's intimidating. Exactly. So the bar's hard. So it's not that you're nervous and you don't. Right. It has to be much more than that. Exactly. And then when you're specifically talking about survivors of trafficking, the trauma is there. It's hard to say there's more trauma than a victim of domestic violence. I'm not saying that, but that there still has to be that level, and it has to be extreme. You have to show very extreme.
You have to prove it. Yeah. So we'll be right back. I want to talk some more about that. And thanks so much for being with us.
We'll be back with more Abolition Radio right after these messages from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Vanessa Scott with Abolition Radio, where every week we invite you to join the fight to bring an end to human trafficking. Abolition Radio is the broadcast outreach of Love Never Fails, our nonprofit, which is dedicated to the rehabilitation, education, and protection of youth involved or at risk of becoming involved in domestic sex trafficking. Our goal with Abolition Radio is to eradicate human trafficking in all forms, sex trafficking and labor trafficking locally and globally. We are excited to bring this program to KFAX, as we will share stories of hope and opportunities to mobilize the body of Christ and turn this audience into an army of gospel activists who will speak up for justice and act on behalf of those who are trapped or recovering from slavery. Find us on Facebook at Abolition Radio or on the web at abolitionradio.org, and join me each Saturday at 3 p.m. for an exciting episode of Abolition Radio right here on AM 1100 KFAX.
Welcome back to Abolition Radio, where you are invited to join the fight against human trafficking.
And welcome back to Abolition Radio, the broadcast outreach of Love Never Fails. So we were just talking about trauma, right? And so that just, it breaks my heart thinking about a minor. I'm thinking of just recently we went on a survivor retreat, and we had a couple of minors there with us, and they were, pretty broken and 16, 17 years old, pretty broken. And I think back to myself being 16 or 17 and having not been raised in a home with a man, having no exposure to safe men in my life, and then being asked to go into a courtroom with a guy who's a judge with gray hair and just him alone. I'm scared.
Right.
And then, I have no familiarity with that. Even just being in a presence of a man of authority. And then you've got two attorneys and they're in business suits. I don't know anything about that. And now I've got to talk about my trafficker in this environment. It's crazy.
And it sounds like what Rose was getting to is part of she feels her calling almost is to make the judicial system aware of, which you would think that they should already be aware, or be trauma informed, and to help them become more trauma informed.
Right.
Outside of the law, I mean, not outside of the law, but not in spite of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yes, taking the law into consideration, but the welfare of a child should have some importance.
Yes.
Right.
That's just me, the teacher, speaking.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
So Rose, Carla, I'd love for you to comment on that because you're advocating for minors in courtroom. You're going into girls' court, right?
That's correct. Yeah, we, primarily our cases are held in girls' court in Alameda County, which is like a slightly more collaborative setting that was originally created specifically to address working with minors who have this history of trafficking. It's definitely a challenging, environment, even when they're not facing their traffickers. Like you were saying, which I think is really great, just to kind of normalize how for even an adult going into a courtroom where you're facing a judge, the language is certainly not accessible for anybody to understand besides somebody who has a law degree, right?
Anybody.
So to be going into that courtroom kind of dealing with all this strangeness, all of this unknown, really already having been through probably a long lifetime of traumatic experiences that have layered on top of each other.
Right.
And then to be able to, in that moment, kind of be the most calm, cool, collected, I'm seeing the person who trafficked me, who I probably have very mixed feelings about, maybe a lot of loyalty to still. But I'm supposed to choose this kind of stranger in this strange environment to just totally disclose and to be able to cohesively disclose everything that happened to me. I mean, it's not real. It's not realistic in terms of everything and all the research about, like what you were saying about trauma-informed practices. Right. It just isn't.
It doesn't exist.
And so right now, the work that we're doing is to try to, in the little ways that we can, work on helping them through that process as much as possible, while we know that there's going to be other people hopefully changing the process at the same time.
Yeah.
So that
down the fort.
Exactly. They got that side, and we're like, whew, thank goodness. We're going to help the ones going through it right now,
Yeah. Well, on that point, right, so the other piece that's so challenging, I know there's some financial provisions with victims of crime, right? When you do share your testimony, you can actually get some relocation dollars. But even that isn't trauma-informed, in my opinion, because, when you talk, I've dealt with this with a couple of families that were extended victims of crime funding. It's like, okay, let me see. My family has grown up in this neighborhood. We are tightly knit into our church, into our neighborhood. Our, my nanny, or, my abuelita is across the street, and I'm just supposed to move to Timbuktu, and in exchange for safety. And now I've lost my entire identity in my community. That's not trauma informed either, right?
Yeah.
So
it's true.
And so it's like, how do you fix this? Because on the flip side, you have, I just spoke with a young lady last week who her exploiter saying, you need to meet me here now. I got people looking for you. You don't meet me here, I'm coming for you. And so they've got pressure on every side. The family doesn't want to say anything because they don't want to have to uproot their entire family from where they're at.
Yeah.
It
sometimes seems like a no-win situation. I always have to kind of remind myself in those moments, we don't have all the solutions yet, right?
Yeah.
Because we still have so many, we've just got all these little puzzle pieces that almost don't fit together quite yet. But I guess the way that I feel hope about that is just that I know that there are people slowly building all these little puzzle pieces, and one day we'll figure out how to close the gap between those two things, right? Where, the traffickers aren't hardly being prosecuted. The buyers hardly being prosecuted compared to these girls who are really still being prosecuted as actually criminals for being trafficked.
Right.
And I know that if I look backwards and see where we've come from, that we still have actually come so far. So hopefully over time, those gaps, will get smaller, and we'll have a system that will create safety for families within their own community. Yeah. Within the spaces where they have that sustainable support system, like you're saying, and still be able to protect them from their exploiter, who often is very close to that community in different ways sometimes.
Right.
Like, people aren't always trafficked out of state or out of the area, so they can just go home and feel safe, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to a lot of the clients that we work with. They often do have to relocate because there's too many triggers. There's the people may still be out there. They may not have testified, or there may just not have been enough clear evidence. They may actually still think of that person actually as like their boyfriend.
They may,
and so to remove them from the situation can actually be advantageous, but it does present a whole new group of challenges, certainly.
Wow. Well, I would like to dig in just a few minutes here. I'd like to dig into what, certainly a little bit of detail about Prop 35 and the ways that started a discussion and kind of came and aligned in a discussion about making buyers more accountable for, what they're doing. I want to say that something like 15% of the cases that are out there are applied to buyers and exploiters, and 85 or 90% are applied to the victims. And so, Daphne and this whole team here have been working hard to try and get that to change. And so we'll come back here in just a moment and talk with Daphne about the original purpose of Prop 35, how it's evolved, because I know there's been some things that have been held up in court, and then get some commentary. I'd love to hear from both the folks that are doing hands-on advocacy in the courts and how it's being, your perspective on how it's being applied. So we'll be back in just a moment with some more of Abolition Radio.
We'll be back with more Abolition Radio right after these messages.
This is Pastor Gary from Faith Fellowship in San Leandro. We are so excited about the launch of Abolition Radio every Saturday. And we have seen Love Never Fails under Vanessa Scott grow right here in San Leandro out of our church at Faith Fellowship. And now her ministry, God gave her a passion to get young people out of the sex trafficking and sex slave industry. And she has been doing a phenomenal job. Not only is it locally, but now it's going globally. In fact, I prophesied to her that God was going to use her to go nationwide, and that's exactly what's been happening. She is a woman with a vision, with a direction, and a passion to see these young people come out of this kind of arena. And to God be the glory. Join with her every Saturday on Abolition Radio to hear what she has to say and then become a part of what she's doing. AbolitionRadio.org. Love never fails.
Welcome back to Abolition Radio, where you are invited to join the fight against human trafficking.
And welcome back to Abolition Radio, the broadcast outreach of Love Never Fails. So we were just talking about Prop 35, and Daphne, maybe you can kind of give us the tenets, the general tenets of the proposition, and then tell us a little bit about how it's evolved. I really want to hear about how it's going, and some of the challenges that maybe you want we can help advocate for, things like that. So,
sure. Prop 35 essentially increased the penalty for human trafficking and elevating it to the same as the federal law. It also removed the need to show force when a minor is involved in sex trafficking. It requires that sex traffickers be registered sex offenders, as well as law enforcement training. It also requires that sex offenders, they have to disclose their online account. So the last provision of the law is now in court. We're fighting it in court right now with the ACLU, but everything else, once Prop 35 is in effect. And it's changed a lot of the landscape of law enforcement and how they deal with this. We're still making progress. It's really slow. But we did finish the law enforcement training module with the
good job.
With the agency. Yeah, and I'm starting to hear from large agencies that they are doing the training now.
Yeah,
so it's a little. It's definitely slow in training, in coming, but we we live in a really big state, and there are like 100,000 law enforcement in the state. So it's very, we just have to be patient with it.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a little bit of the same experience in trying to educate the children. Right. We get buy-in from a school district, and then we're not actually doing the training for a couple of months, maybe even
many months.
Yeah, and it's because of all of the it's not easy to do.
Right,
it is not easy. So, but on that point though, you just finished in San Jose.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Daphne, I can tell you that. Via the South Bay Coalition and the law enforcement agencies connected there, every month we're hearing more and more about the training that is happening, more and more training and things that they haven't had in a really long time. So
that's excellent.
Yeah, San Diego just started theirs.
Cool.
That's cool. Yeah. So on that, is that the beat cops? So is that everyone in law enforcement, or is that just the human trafficking divisions?
That's for everybody.
Everyone. Yep.
Yeah.
That is so important.
The training that we created, because it was only 2 hours long, we had to focus it on the patrol costs, because that's like 80% of the officers patrol. We are in touch with the agency, so we do encourage them for their specialized units, like the sex crime units or the human trafficking unit, that they provide much more in-depth training.
I know the human trafficking unit, the sheriff's department, and the FBI in the South Bay are all.
Yeah, and we're also we actually are working with POST, which is the statewide agency for law enforcement training. We are working with them on maybe a certificate, like an investigative certificate.
Great,
that would be good. Yeah. Okay, and so the other provisions, right? So, if you could kind of expand a bit on show force, what exactly? So our listeners are just coming up to speed on what human trafficking is, and what does that mean, and how does that? What would that look like in terms of a courtroom that requires a minor to show force, or an adult to show force, and one that doesn't?
Well, similar to the federal law, the currently Prop 35 basically says that if someone is basically obtaining money or causing a minor to be sold in commercial sex, that they can be prosecuted for human trafficking without the need to prove that the minor was forced into the situation.
Okay.
The fact that they are gaining financially from the transaction, it's enough to prove a case of human trafficking.
So, okay, so just for clarity then, when I read that initially, I was thinking about scenarios where there's a 14-year-old who's in a car with a 40-year-old man, and they have no relation, and they're driving down the street, and a police officer pulls them over. Is that, that alone, the fact that someone who's an unrelated 40-year-old man has a 14-year-old in their car in a place known for exploitation, is that enough proof to get started on a case, or does there have to be a testimony on the part of the victim?
No, that's not enough of a case for human trafficking or anything, actually. Not even for prostitution or any of the other crimes. There needs to be something else.
An exchange
involved.
Of funding.
Exchange of funding. There needs to be evidence that if it's a trafficker situation, there needs to be proof that the trafficker is benefiting from selling, from this minor being sold for sex. So that part has to be proved, right? Otherwise, being in a car with a minor that you don't know in an area that's shady, it's not.
It's not enough. Wow.
Could be a neighbor,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could be a neighbor, but could be somebody who's just hitchhiking, right? Those are scenarios.
Yeah, I'm just shaking my head over here because that really irks me. But okay, I know that you're innocent until proven guilty. Okay. Don't put me on the judge stand. Sorry. So I guess just looking for feedback from the service provider team here that that's going into the courts and kind of see some of these situations play out. How has Prop 35 moving into law? How has that helped you in let's say, the girls' court proceedings, Rose C?
So it's an interesting question, just because the girls' court, just to kind of clarify, girls' court is a section of the juvenile court system in Alameda County, and the place where the traffickers are prosecuted would not be in that same court system.
Right, okay.
It's going to be in a criminal court law system, and right now the juvenile court system that we spend most of our time advocating in is actually the court system where the minors are being prosecuted.
Right, got ya.
Even though they might also at the same time have a criminal case that they are a witness in the criminal court system for the adult trafficker. So we don't see very much of that play out, but we do sometimes, if they have an active heat case, in Alameda County, we will sometimes be a party to that case as well and support them through that process. But most of the advocacy we do is going to be where they are actually considered the criminal, ironically.
Wow.
Right.
So we're talking about go ahead.
One of the things that we're working on, and I have been getting some, complaints from service providers as well as cops, is that the court is not honoring the evidentiary protection in Prop 35 for these victims, and that's one thing that we are working on right now with the city attorneys, the judges, in educating them. We're starting the process of that, in educating them about the topic. We've done a lot with the prosecutors on the traffickers, but we have done very little at this point with educating city attorneys and people who are prosecuting basically the misdemeanor crimes.
Daphne, do you mean in terms of the evidence?
Yeah, well, the evidentiary, if a victim is a part of an established human trafficking case, their evidence against them cannot be used to prosecute them, right? So they have evidentiary protection.
Yes, they should. But unfortunately, that's not happening.
It's not happening.
Yeah, not in the court system. I've represented minors where they're considered a victim and they're providing evidence to prosecute their traffickers. And on the same hand, and I'm sure that Rose can attest to this as well, because that's what the work that she's doing as a first responder and going into the courtroom is we are still criminalizing our victims. And just another thing to tie in about Prop 35 is I think it's great in terms of the evidence and not the minors not having to show force, but it's specifically for commercial sexual exploitation. It is not for labor trafficking. And we have minors that are trafficked here in the United States for labor. Yeah. And they have to show that they've been forced.
Yeah. Okay.
So we need to. There's still work to do ahead about the legislation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but actually we did talk. We did look into that when we were drafting the language. The issue is that we have a lot of kids who do help their family business, right, on the farms, or on the grocery store, or whatever. So we have to be in the language that we do. We have to be very mindful that there are minors who are working in the family business after school or whatever, as part of helping out the family, right?
Right. Yeah. So, I know that I remember this coming up quite a bit during the rollout of Prop 35, and I think we all agreed that this was a good place to get started, and we needed to build upon it,
right?
And craft that language, right, that doesn't keep people from being able to engage their family in a family business, but at the same time protects the rest of the minors. So we're going to stop here for just a second and give a moment for our sponsors, and thank you for listening to Abolition Radio.
We'll be back with more Abolition Radio right after these messages from our sponsors.
Hi, this is Vanessa Scott with Abolition Radio, where every week we invite you to join the fight to bring an end to human trafficking. Abolition Radio is the broadcast outreach of Love Never Fails, our nonprofit, which is dedicated to the rehabilitation, education, and protection of youth involved or at risk of becoming involved in domestic sex trafficking. Our goal with Abolition Radio is to eradicate human trafficking in all forms, sex trafficking and labor trafficking locally and globally. We are excited to bring this program to KFAX as we will share stories of hope and opportunities to mobilize the body of Christ and turn this audience into an army of gospel activists who will speak up for justice and act on behalf of those who are trapped or recovering from slavery. Find us on Facebook at Abolition Radio or on the web at abolitionradio.org, and join me each Saturday at 3 p.m. for an exciting episode of Abolition Radio right here on AM 1100 KFAX.
Welcome back to Abolition Radio, where you are invited to join the fight against human trafficking.
And welcome back to Abolition Radio, the broadcast outreach of Love Never Fails. So we are going to tell you a little bit about some things that are going on in the community that you can get involved in. We welcome you if you have an interest in being involved in in this fight against human trafficking. Let's say you're a paralegal, or you're a law student, or you're an aspiring law student, someone who wants to, even someone who's interested in advocacy. We've worked with CASA advocates in the past, and they are fantastic. We certainly could refer you on to them.
Grad students.
Any interest in this space, we need people to help people to get their identity back. Identity theft is huge here. Expungements, again. If you are a service provider that wants to offer your services pro bono, that would be greatly appreciated. So, we just want to encourage you, again, going back to my silly comment from our first show about, warming milk for pigeons. Anything you can do that will help to fight against this, atrocity, this crime against humanity is welcomed, and we would love to connect you into the partners that we have here at the table with us, or anyone else that we might be working with in this space. Oh, also, I do want to mention that on March the 7th, we are doing a walkathon. Is that with YCAT?
Yes, YCAT will be doing a walkathon in the Tri-Valley area.
In the Tri-Valley area. Yes. Okay. So
San Ramon.
San Ramon. So we want to encourage you to check out our webpage, which is loveneverfailsus.com, the events page specifically, and you will see more details about how you can join that. We also would like to welcome you to attend our Action Network meeting, which is always on the first Sunday of every month from 2:15 to 4:15, and that is at Lift Ministries at 22580 Grand Street in Hayward. That will be on March 1st from 2:15 to 4:15. We also always have our outreaches on the third Saturday of every month. And so, again, get in touch with us. We actually now have changed our email addresses, so you can reach me at vanessa@loveneverfailsus.com, or if you want information about our outreaches, you can reach Brenda Ribbs at community@loveneverfailsus.com. I'd like to go around and just give each of our guests an opportunity to share some parting words in terms of things that they really need to further their particular focus today. So, Daphne, if you want to start us off, I'd love to hear what you're in need of.
Well, right now we're actually trying to pass, basically run another bill in our state legislature addressing demand. We tried to do that last year and it got mutilated. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we will be able to have some win this year with some new leadership in the assembly. So I think what we really need is people to be able to really hold the elected officials accountable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how can people get in touch with you, Daphne, to get involved with that?
You can go to CaliforniaAgainstSlavery.org and sign up for our email list.
Okay, great. So definitely get involved with Daphne there. And then Rose Carlyle with BAWAR, what are some things that we could help you with?
Well, one need we certainly have, although it does take a little bit of time and training, is we are definitely always looking for volunteers to be a part of our advocacy process, and also just to support all of the workings that have to happen behind the scenes as well. Mm-hmm. When we as staff often really do provide so much direct service. Another thing is we always kind of have a little wish list of things that we like to provide to the youth that we work with. Yeah. Some of it may be clothes, some of it may be little care packages that we send them if they move out of the area. So there's a number of things. I just would encourage people to reach out, and the director of our program, Christopher Watson, is always happy to have conversations.
Yay,
great guy.
Yeah, he wasn't able to be here today, but he's always real happy to have conversations with people. And we have been getting some support since he's been directing the program that has just been wonderful from the community. So, people are welcome to just call directly our agency number. Is it okay if I
please share.
The direct line for our agency is 510-444-8255. 430-1298, and you can leave a message for him or myself, Rose Carlyle, or our other program staff member, Victory Moncrief.
Wonderful. Okay, so and they've just recently opened up an office in Fremont, so they're expanding their services. So please do reach out and get involved there. Yay! And then Rose, if you want to take us out with anything that you need, I know Rose provides advocacy and pro bono work for Love Never Fails, but she also, I was just on a conference call the other day, and she was like a board member on 3 other, like I think it was Covenant House and West Coast Children's Clinic, and so she gets around, this wonderful lady. So what can we help you with?
I often get the question from other attorneys when they find out the work that I do. They're like, I want to help, but I'm just not sure what I can do, because they didn't go into the law to practice that. They're doing IP, or they're a contract litigator. So the one thing that I will say is that no matter what the work is that you're doing, whether you're an attorney or a paralegal or you do court accompaniment, is you can still get involved and help. And Love Never Fails has this great legal network, and we meet once a month prior to the actual network meeting. And we try to we talk about whatever issues are going on, and anybody that is willing to volunteer their services. And even, again, if you're a contract attorney for an IP, you have that experience of looking at contracts, and a lot of the nonprofits need assistance and reviewing of contracts. So you can still get involved and help. And feel free to contact me through Love Never Fails Network, or directly contacting me, because I'm trying to build my own pro bono service to reach as many survivors as I can.
Yay, Rose. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you all, and thank you for being with us today. And if you haven't heard this from anyone in your midst, we always want to leave end our shows with letting you know that you are loved.
Yes.
And we will be back with another edition of Abolition Radio, the broadcast outreach of Love Never Fails, next week, Saturday, 3 to 4 p.m. Look forward to seeing you there.
Thanks for joining us this week on Abolition Radio. We trust that you've been inspired by these stories of hope and survival, and that you'll accept our challenge to get involved by contacting us at abolitionradio.org, by liking and sharing our page on Facebook, Facebook.com/Abolition Radio, or by making a contribution directly to Love Never Fails. Abolition Radio is the broadcast outreach of Love Never Fails, which is a donor-supported, nonprofit ministry that Vanessa founded as a way of directly impacting the lives of young people who are trapped in or at risk of becoming involved in sex trafficking. This broadcast needs your involvement and support. To find out more, simply go to abolitionradio.org and click on Love Never Fails. Today's program was brought to you in part by CAS Industries and with major support from the staff and membership and donors at Faith Fellowship Church. Our theme song, Courage to Believe, is by Justin McRoberts. Hear more about his passion for justice and art at justinmcroberts.com. Our audio engineer is Jarrell Martin, and this is Dave Naderhood. On behalf of Vanessa, Benita, and the whole team at Love Never Fails, thanks for listening, and thanks even more for taking action to help set captives free.
You're in the neighborhoods we live in. You're in the ones we're passing by. You're in the ones we call our neighbors, and the ones who still escape our eyes.